sleeps on the wind, this little bird that somebody's.
Hi, Art Fein's Poker Party coming to you from Hollywood with some real special guests. That was John D. Loudermilk, by the way, with the original version of This Little Bird, which is on that 12-cut RCA album from about 1960. We got some real special guests in today. Particularly special, brand new, never been here before, is Catherine James. Catherine, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Art.
Nice to see you.
Thank you.
Because I've been seeing you, not seeing you, but I've been seeing you off and on for 20 years because we lived in the same apartment building.
It's very suspect.
And along the ways, I wrote a book, but you've already seen that, so don't bother, Gus. Again, everybody has this anyways. But
actually, I didn't have that.
But right here, as long as you're doing it, we have a freeze of this, but I thought I'd hold it to give it the human touch. There it is. This is Catherine's book, Dandelion. It just came out, and it's a memoir, and we're going to talk about that in just a second. First, we got to say hi to Todd Everett. Hi, Todd Everett. Yeah.
Hi, Todd.
I have not written a memoir, mainly because I can't remember anything. I was just having lunch with somebody yesterday who reminded me of when I served divorce papers on her husband for her. I didn't remember that at all.
So I think it'll be one of those things where everybody gets together. I don't think you want that either.
Yeah,
everybody gets together and recollects their memories of you. All right. Well, and as Catherine has had a very interesting life, which she's going to tell us about, or she has told us about in the book. You're a Hollywood kid.
Yes.
Oh, no, that was a bunch of
that was
public
another
access
show, yeah.
people, another show in the 80s. You grew up here, but she had a very difficult childhood and ran away from home at
11.
11.
Right, and I went to New York City by myself at 14.
And you wrote a whole book. How much schooling did you have?
Probably, if you stick all the elementary schools together, about 4 years. And I went to 16 different elementary schools. I think I covered every school in Los Angeles.
And it's not just a book about the schools you went to, but also all the famous people you encountered along the way.
Well, growing up in Hollywood, you meet famous people.
But most of them were met elsewhere. Most of them were met in England and
yeah,
New York
but
stuff.
my aunt was pretty famous, and she was married to Busby Berkeley.
I'm sorry, say that again?
My aunt was first runner-up for Miss America in 1936, and she was married to Busby Berkeley. And
She was married to Busby. So what was your aunt's name?
Claire James. There's pictures of her in the book.
Right.
And my stepfather was a pretty famous folk singer, and there was a lot of famous people hanging around our house.
And your mother was a singer too?
My mother was a bluegrass singer.
I thought it was Diane, but it's
Dion. Yeah.
Dion.
Well, she changed her name depending what part of her
I mean,
life
do you
she was
not
in.
want to name these people particularly?
I don't mind naming my mother. There's that one person, the pedophile, I didn't want to
No, the
mention.
pedophile and the fellow you call the folk singer.
Right.
You don't name
Right.
him either,
No,
and you
no.
don't want
Or
to now. I take it.
Well, only because they're alive, and I'm not trying to cause anybody any.
No, that's cool.
You know,
I just want to make sure we
unnecessary
don't do
misery.
anything we're supposed
All
to.
right.
your travels and your life took you all around
Well, you were
the
right.
world.
Well, I had been living in an orphanage, and
You had parents, though. How did you end up in an orphanage?
because my mother, I was in a ward of the state, living in.
You chose to be according.
Right.
You were given a choice of going back to your parents.
Right, or being a ward of the state, and I picked ward of
And
the
you
state.
picked ward of the state.
Right, so I lived
Sounds
in.
like home life wasn't too good.
It was frightening.
Yeah.
So I finally got away, and when they wanted to take me home, I chose to go to Las Padrinas in Downey. And I actually hid out there for a couple months until they found me. And then my grandparents got me in this. It was an orphanage, but my grandfather had been a substantial benefactor to this particular
And Los
orphanage.
Padrinos was sort of a reform school, right?
It was like jail. It was
Yeah.
a kiddie prison. It had, all the scary girls from Compton were there. It was the gang girls. And so my grandfather got me into this orphanage where I could have visiting on weekends. Because my grandparents adored me, but there was also problems between my mother and her family, so they didn't want me to see them. So I got in this orphanage, and somebody was going to go see a Bob Dylan show who knew a budding Bob Dylan. He was still carrying his music around in paper bags. He had that first album out before the Free Willing, so he wasn't famous. He was playing a school auditorium.
So the people 62 or so.
It was 63.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we got on like a house on fire. And he was very interested in my story and what was going on with me. So, he said, well, there's a party after the show. Why don't you come with me?
But you were 12 or something?
I was 13.
13, yeah.
So I.
And there's no romance there. It's just
No,
a wonderful
there's
guy, very
no
nice,
romance. Really-
avuncular guy to you.
Right.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, Uncle Bob.
Yeah.
And we just started talking, and when he went back to Woodstock, we talked on the phone, and he just gave me this imparted wisdom that made me feel like I was empowered and I could do whatever I wanted to do. So I decided I would run away from this orphanage and go to New York City and go to Greenwich Village and be a folk singer. And that's what I did. And so then it kind of goes through the adventures of being 14 in New York City by yourself and not knowing anybody, because when I actually did get to the city and called him, he was just on his way on tour. So I didn't get a chance to really spend any time with him.
But you never were actually a street kid like we hear
I
about.
was totally a street kid in the village.
Were you sleeping in doorways and stuff?
You know, was always somebody who offered me somewhere to stay. I mean, I found some kids in Washington Square over the weekend, kids, they were like 19, 20.
Yeah.
Got an apartment on 8th Street.
But you say when you were 13 or 14, I guess you were looking older, right?
You know, I was already like 5'8" when I was 14. So I was tall and I was, kind of voluptuous.
And at this point, nobody took notice of or asked for an ID. Where's your driver's
I always said I was almost 18. That was pretty much my stock answer. But it was obvious I wasn't. But I looked older and I was smart because I'd grown up with all these adults in Hollywood, with my parents. And
Well, my daughter's growing up with me, and I'm in Hollywood, but I don't know if she's going to be that street smart. But
our
you're
house was
partic-
like the party house and a lot of drugs and.
Now there's
I've been
a-
taking drugs. My mother was a drug addict, so I'd been around drugs since I was a baby, and my brother.
And you mentioned that in the book, you mentioned that the people stayed, the Dillards were staying at your house for a while.
They had the full group, bluegrass group, the Dillards staying at my house, and
But then,
because my mother treated me so badly, they were so appalled that the bass player, Mitch Jane, had decided that he was just going to sneak me out of the house one night and put me on a plane so I could go live with his family, and they were going to raise me.
and that's happened more than once to you, right? Where people thought they would.
Many times people tried to take me away from my mother, but there was no child services back then, so that there's nobody to call, and it's the kind of thing is if you tell what happened, they're not going to believe you, and I could never tell on my parents because they did actually take me downtown to the railroad tracks one night and drop me off in the middle of downtown
Your
Los
parents
Angeles.
did?
My mother and the folk singer.
And they took you downtown to Union Station.
When I was 11, beyond Union Station, and told me to get out of the car and drove away. Yeah, they were pretty scary, my parents.
Your actual father is portrayed in here as becoming not your father anymore, but
Right.
your
My real
mother.
father was a race car driver, and he was a really interesting, very macho stunt man race car driver. And I didn't see him for years because of the relationship between my mother and him.
Yeah.
But when we finally, he remarried the girl that he'd met in high school before he met my mother. He dropped her and fell in love with my mother, so she didn't want anything to do with me.
I see.
And then that's a whole other story. So
So-
when she finally died, she died pretty young, and then my father and I started spending time together. We started, being a father-daughter relationship, going to dinner, going, bicycle riding, and we were having a pretty good time until he asked me to meet him at Musso and Frank's because he wanted to tell me something. And when I got there, he wasn't. It wasn't my dad. He actually had a sex change in the couple of weeks we hadn't seen each other.
So he wasn't dressing. He wasn't a transvestite. He was
No, he was a transsexual.
transsexual.
Yes, and now he wanted to be like my mother. He was like, wanted to talk to me like
Girl to girl.
girl to girl talk. And I was,
And how old were you?
I think I was about 39.
No, how old were you?
Yeah, I think I was about 39.
Oh, that happened that late. Oh,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
see.
He was
Oh.
in his 60s.
Oh,
Well, he
okay.
was not a cute transsexual. He looked like a scary guy. And I was nice to him, because I didn't go, wow. I'm like, oh, I've seen this before, and if you're
Yeah.
happy with this, I'm happy for you. And yeah, he was quite the character, too.
So we didn't even talk about the. Now you were always in musical milieu in your house.
Always, yeah.
So, whereas you didn't play an instrument and you did sing
Well, I
later
played
on.
guitar. I played
played
guitar.
And you did sing background stuff later on
In Air Force, yeah.
in the Ginger Baker.
In Ginger Baker's Air Force in England, yeah.
But you became active and meet a lot of people in
Well, when
England.
When I was in the village, I met this girl who started, some rich girl in the village, and we became, like two peas in a pod. And I went and moved in with her and her mother. And we used to go dancing at all the clubs, and I think I was like 15 by then, and we were taking LSD every night and whatever, out till 5, 6 o'clock in the morning, dancing on Dean's, Arthur's, all the happening clubs of that particular era.
Yeah.
And I did go to a show, a rehearsal for Murray the K on. Murray the K was this big show promoter, and he did Easter shows, Christmas shows. And so I went in with my girlfriend. We snuck in for the rehearsal because we didn't have any money to go to these shows. But we snuck in the back door of the theater, thinking we could sneak in for the show. Well, it was only the rehearsal of the show, and nobody was in the auditorium except the Who were on stage, and it was like basically the first notes they ever played on stage.
Right, in America.
So
yeah.
it was a Who and Eric Clapton and Smokey Robinson and Martha and the Vandellas, and probably about 10 acts, and they basically did, I think they did 4 acts a day, all of them, or maybe it was
4
6.
whole shows a day.
4 shows a day, starting at 10:30 in the morning.
Yeah.
So you could see the Who at 10:30 in the morning for 15 minutes, and then you could see Cream. So anyway, we became great friends with these guys because they didn't know anybody in America, and here was these 2 girls in the audience, and, so we started going every day, and we just hang out backstage every day.
But the Moody Blues weren't part of that show, right?
No, they weren't.
I mentioned that because
Right.
the next
I did. I fell in love with Denny Lane when I was 15, but
who people may know as a member of Wings.
he was with Wings, right? And he was
prior
also
to-
did the song "Go Now" in
Moody
when he was with the Moody Blues, and I was too young to go at the time, so
So you had to go where?
to England. He wanted me to go back to England. He didn't know I was only 15. Until he took me to Puerto Rico, and the rest of the band members had a good look at me on the beach, and they went, "We need to talk to you." So then Denny said, "Well, come to England," and I still didn't tell him I was 15, so I kept telling him different reasons I couldn't come yet. But as soon as I was 16, I forged papers and got a passport. And I went to England, and then I ran into Roger Daltrey again, and
Again? Oh, since the Who show.
yeah, since
He was
Who
in the
show.
Who.
Yeah,
Oh,
he was
that's
in the
right,
Who.
yeah.
You're right. And so what
He was one of
happened
those
is
bands.
Denny and I had a baby. I had a baby when I was 17.
17, eh?
But I started singing in Ginger Baker's Air Force because Denny was the guitar player. And then when Denny and I weren't getting along so well, I moved in with Roger and his girlfriend. And then, it's all in the book. It's a long story, but
Yeah.
I ended up moving in with Eric Clapton. So the guys that I had met in New York City, I was now singing in Ginger's band. I was best friends with Roger Daltrey and living with Eric Clapton, which who would have thought when you walked in for a rehearsal for a show?
You owe it all to Murray the K?
I do. I owe it all to Murray the
The
King.
fifth Beatle. By the way, might as well talk about your book. This isn't. You don't know this is a book interview, but it is. I'm going to point. Oh, there it is, Dandelion.
Now, this isn't like a lot of the book interviews you see on public access.
We know more about the subject than most of the book interviews, and we've read the book.
It's not like the book interviews you see on C-SPAN, for that matter.
No.
Okay, so but you stayed at Eric's house, or anyway.
Well, he was just starting the Layla album, and it was Derek and the Dominoes. He just put them together, so Derek and the Dominoes all lived at his house in Surrey.
Uh-huh.
And they were writing all that amazing music for that album, Layla. And it was at the time when Roger was Eric, that whole Eric and Patty thing
Yeah.
was going on. So there was, tragedy in the manor.
Is it? I'm getting my dates a little smeared here, but you mentioned George Harrison coming over, having just written "My Sweet Lord," right?
Oh, this is when I was living at Eric's, when Derek and the Dominoes lived there.
Yeah.
And there was a party for Jim Gordon, the drummer.
Mhm.
Oh, I think isn't he incarcerated
Yeah,
now?
he's
Right.
gone wacko. Yeah.
And everybody had come to this. George Harrison, Mick Jagger, all the guys from Derek and the Dominoes. It was a huge country rock and roll party at Eric's house. And that's where I met Mick Jagger at the party. Well, I'd actually seen him when he'd come up another time before then, but there was not much interaction except hello. So,
But at this party, there was interaction.
yes, there was.
Okay.
Well, someone had spiked the punch with mescaline,
Oh.
so we got pretty high. And Denny and I had broken
Good
up.
excuse as any. Yeah.
Denny and I had broken up, but he would spend weekends in London with his dad, Denny, and then he'd come back to the country during the week. So this particular weekend,
With his dad.
Denny, because Denny and I broke up. I was
Right.
living with Eric Clapton
Right.
on a platonical,
Oh, I see.
yeah,
Mhm.
and it was just just for the summer. And so I was really pretty feeling psychedelic, so I thought, well, I better, call Damien and say goodnight. Well,
Damien, your son.
My son.
Have we established his name is Damien?
My son, no, we didn't.
No, we didn't.
Yeah, my
Okay.
son did.
Yeah.
And he was a toddler. He was probably like 3.
Yeah.
So I thought I'd better call and say goodnight. And when I was on the phone in the next room, you could hear the whole band, everybody playing My Sweet Lord. So the whole house was kind of shaking because this is a country house. You could hear it all the village over because they rehearsed every night. And this music rang out of this house. And that's when Mick came in. And
introduced himself,
Introduced
so to speak.
himself, yeah.
So that's pretty good. No, I mean,
And then we started, and then it just went on from there. And then
so you had a affair of some length. So,
yes, I left Eric's house and moved in with Mick, me and Damien and Mick.
you and your toddler. Wow.
And he had Marianne Faithfull's ex-nursery on the top floor because before me, it was Marianne Faithfull. You see, this was kind of like musical chairs back then.
Literally musical.
Musical chairs.
Yeah.
In the 60s, it was like everybody was so interesting and everybody wanted to have their little time with everyone.
Okay, so now let's get around to Jimmy Page.
Right. Right. So anyway, I had decided that I didn't want, I got so tired of this whole rock and roll deal.
Yeah.
And Mick wanted me to go on to Paris, and I thought, I have this plane ticket to California. You go to Brussels, I'll go to Los Angeles, and I will meet back here, or you come to Los Angeles. Because I'm thinking we have a pretty steady relationship. I'm not worried about anything.
Yeah, looks like a pretty stable guy at that time.
Well, he told me he loved me. So I...
Never worked for me.
Yeah. So I went I moved to the country. I got myself a beautiful log cabin on a lake in Brookfield, Connecticut to raise my son. I thought, this is it. I don't want to be with anybody. I don't want to see anybody. And I just want a tranquil, simple life. And I think I was
So seeking this
20.
this tranquil life, that's where Jimmy Page comes in?
right.
Oh, okay.
Yes. Yeah, I met him because I used to, when I was a runaway, when I first got to New York, I had a job. I always had jobs. I was playing records at a place called Ondine, which was like the hot discotheque at the time. And I went to visit my friend who opened a new discotheque called Salvation. And his name was Bradley Pierce, and he ran all the happening clubs in New York City. So he goes, oh, I want you to meet a friend of mine who just got into town from London. So so we go into his office, and he said, this is Jimmy, and I'm like, wow. He was really cute. And he looked at me the same way. So I think he was, I'm not sure if he was with a band yet, or he might have been in the Yardbirds, but Led Zeppelin, it was no Led Zeppelin going on yet. He was just a very cute guy.
Yeah.
So actually a lot of this happened in California too.
How much time we got left? You gotta make sure we gotta get enough in here. Okay, 7 minutes left.
7 minutes left.
By the way, earlier in the book, you did talk about the record producer from Los Angeles who fell in love with you at age 11. And you were age 11, and and it's in the book. But you said that he actually married an 18-year-old girl.
Well, that's what he told me, to try to get me out of the institution that I was in. He married a girl, and
He married the girl so they could adopt you.
so they could adopt me, and he could have me. Yes.
So you and Jimmy, we're up to about 1970 now. We got 6 minutes left.
Well, you know what? There's also the book kind of ends with kind of ties everything up together. The last time I saw Jimmy, I went with him while he was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And
Were you living in New York then?
yes, I was.
Because you went back and lived in New York in 95?
Yeah, with Patty when I was working on the
With
New York.
Patty?
Patty Dartmanville, the actress. She was
Right.
doing a show called New York Undercover.
And then you were doing sitting in for her. What do you call it?
I did.
Doubling?
Yeah, I was. No, I was too tall to double for Patty. 'Cause she's everything. But
But you have doubled for Diane Keaton.
Yes, I actually photo doubled for Diane Keaton in a few movies. So a lot of times you think it's Diane, but
It's
I would
you.
do the wide shot, and it's
I see.
actually it was me.
So the Jimmy thing lasted a while, and then because we're in the early 70s now, and we got about 25 years to cover. And I guess if you want to know the whole thing, show the book again, I guess.
Yeah.
Dandelion, Catherine James' new book. You are good friends with Pamela DeBar.
Yes, I am. Known her since she was 17. Oh, she was a rival because it was Jimmy Page actually in the beginning of our relationship when he came back to Los Angeles, and he just put Led Zeppelin together because he told me, I'm going to try and put this band together. If it does good, we're going to do a tour in California. So he came to LA, played the Whiskey. They did really well. And he stayed at my house for the first few nights, and then the next thing I know, he was with Pamela.
Staying at Pamela's house.
And no, Pamela was staying at the Hyatt house. It kind of
annoyed you?
It broke my heart. I was crazy about him. I thought he was it.
Well, that's too bad.
He was this pre-Raphaelite prince to me, with the house in the country with a moat, and of course I wanted to be part of that.
Well, I know the highlight, of course, was living in El Cerrito Place when I lived there.
That was the highlight.
You got to know me.
That's exactly right.
That's right, from 1981 till 1990.
Well, you helped me start writing the first chapter of my book because
That's right.
I didn't have a typewriter. I had a paper and pencil, and I would take it over to Art's house, and it would be just like scribble of all these ideas. I'd say, "Could you help me put this together? I'm writing a book," and Art would do it.
I pecked away.
He pecked away, and that was the beginning of my little wild story.
So you've had a very tempestuous life.
Hence the as typed by.
Once upon a time. By the way, you had said you have a 7th grade education, but you took writing courses? I mean, I never knew anybody that really
No, I didn't take a writing course. What I did is after my father died, that's a whole nother story where his lawyer took my entire
your birth father, the race car driver.
He died.
Transsexual.
His lawyer took my entire inheritance, so I had to go fight for that. Well, I said to God, if you just let me win this court case, I'll go to school, I'll go to college, and I'll get an education, and I'll be a psychiatrist. And so after the whole thing was over, I actually did win the case, and I went, oh right, I have to go to school. Because I promised. So I took an English class. Like they gave me English 101, which was like, your first English class. And I got this fabulous teacher who would just tell us great stories and then tell us to write about something we were passionate about. And he made it sound so easy. So I would just, write my little stories. And then when I decided I was serious about the book, I got a book called Writing Down the Bare Bones. And that was very helpful. And so I just started writing the book, paragraph every day. I plugged away at it.
But how about, just real elementary stuff like spelling and that sort of thing?
Spell check.
Okay, so.
Yeah, and plus I'd love to do crossword puzzles, so I do a lot of crossword puzzles.
Well,
so you really are self-educated.
I'm self-educated.
So when I was reading the book, I was kind of shocked that you could have written it, because it really is neat the way it's written.
Well, thank you.
And you did write it yourself, no co-writers?
Every word is my
That's
word.
great.
Yeah,
really cool.
And I sold it a month after I wrote it. I sent it to one person, and it was sold.
Many of the people covered in the book are English, so is there an interest in it? Have you been over to England to tour?
I haven't been there for about 10 years.
So there hasn't been a book tour of England, let's say, or
No.
media tour, whatever.
No, people keep asking me if I'm going to have a book tour, so I'm hoping.
Yeah.
But it's doing well. You can get it at...
No, well, you can get it wherever you get books, whatever.
Yeah.
We don't.
It's doing well in the bookstores and the internet.
She might even have a website, but I wouldn't know how to find that.
Yeah,
I do have a website.
Well, you gotta have to figure that out.
I can't put that in it?
No, but it's something else.
Where would you look for a website on Catherine with a C, James?
I don't know. or the book Dandelion.
Or the book Dandelion.
Yeah. So again, you ended up back in New York in '95. Damien was long grown and
He's grown up
out
now, yeah.
reproducing.
Yeah.
He's 40 years old now.
Yes. He's 40.
And in New York, besides doing this occasional TV work you did, you had an apartment there. Did you have a boyfriend there? Did you have some kind of life there?
I had a boyfriend for a while, and then and I had an apartment, and then I went out. I hated living in the city. It was so hot in the city. So eventually I moved in with Patty Darbanville, the actress. She had a big, huge Victorian house, 8-bedroom house. And we'd go to work every morning together.
In New York City?
No, in Seacliff, Long Island.
I see. Okay.
So I moved up on the 5th floor, and we'd do the show every day and come back and forth in the city, and just had a grand old time together.
When did you come back to? We have to go, but when did you come back to L.A.?
It was time to come home. My grandmother was getting old. I wanted to...
And your mom passed away?
Yeah, I didn't want to be, living in her house, like the spinster aunt for the next till the end. I was trying to get my own place and start another life.
Very cool. Catherine James, Dandelion, St. Martin's Press. Really
Thank you.
interesting book.
Thank you.
And we don't often have writers having books on this show. But
That's true.
we have writers, but not with books. We have writers that write, like Todd Everett here. Writes the back of albums and stuff like that. So what are we at, Gus? 1 minute. All right, Catherine, can you think any more interesting? There's so many interesting.
Yes, it's like a wild roller coaster ride, Mr. Toad's Wild Ride.
There's a lot of details about the early years, which I didn't get into, about how terrible your home life was.
Oh yeah,
But
well.
You have to read the book to find that
Yeah,
out, I guess.
well, I think the thing is that after that kind of upbringing, that I always knew once I got out of that, everything else would be a breeze, and it basically has felt like a breeze. And
It'll probably make pretty much anybody who sees this show feel a lot better about their own home life, A,
Yeah.
and B, point out Catherine turned out pretty darn well.
yeah, I'm happy, and I have a nice family, and my life is great. But I think it might not have turned out so well had I had this, little happy phone life. But I also had this fabulous, eccentric grandmother who was kind of like my savior, who just pops in and out throughout the book.
She's where you got that big rock on your hand?
Yeah, she gave me the big 3.5 carat diamond before she died.
We won't give out your address. So, Catherine James, thanks a lot. We're going to listen again to John D. Loudermilk original version of This Little Bird, which is, of course, a Marianne Faithfull hit, but this is
Great.
how it started.
He just likes to rub it in your...
Born on the wind, and he sleeps on the wind. This little bird that somebody sends. He's light and fragile and feathered sky blue, so thin and graceful the sun shines through. This little bird that lives on the wind, this little bird that somebody sends.